in the mid to late 90s, if you were looking for a decent place to watch cartoons, you had one of three places: either Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. Unless, of course, you were really lucky and you stumbled upon cartoons on one of the many other cable channels that were out there that may have randomly had one, like TNT, TBS, CBS, ABC, Fox, things like that. Of course, all of that, though, did have its ups and downs in the world. Yeah, I know a lot of people would prefer to remember the good old days when Fox Kids was around and pretty much when Kids WB was a thing. Hell, I remember when Saturday morning cartoons finally died off. It was a sad, sad day for everyone. However, back in the mid to late 90s, there were two colossal giants going at it with one another, trying to have dominance over the children's market. Of course, these two have bones to pick with me. Granted, there is a third, but they have their own pedestal of which they have their own issues of, and I don't really feel like touching that one today. Anyway, this time on Andrew Discusses, we're taking a look at Cartoon Network versus Nickelodeon. How both of them screwed up, and how both of them are somehow still going. I have no idea either, but hey, it's always going to be fun, right? Alright, so back in 1992, Cartoon Network came into the world. And before that, Nickelodeon was barely squeaking along. But they had their own little foothold in the world. And of course, with every foothold, there was a massive amount of screw yous going on. Everything from programming to what we're going to do late night all played a key and intricate role. Now, keep in mind, most of the information I have today is from my own personal experience watching the two said networks, and sadly, most of the information is from my own memories. So there may be some gaps here and there that I honestly either blocked out, don't remember, or honestly could give two craps about. That being said, Nickelodeon was the first place that I remember watching some strange and unusual television. And that was in the form of Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Ah Real Monsters, and Doug. Yes, the classic cartoons. Or Nicktoons as they were called back then. They were a unique little blend of strange shows that gave me some comfort in my, well, childhood-like demeanor. Of course, there were also other things thrown in the mix as well, like game shows including Double Dare, and some of my personal favorite memories are from a show called Legends of the Hidden Temple. However, that had its own can of worms, and Nickelodeon decided to reopen that one with a made-for-TV movie. Because, of course they did. It's not like they have anything better to do. However, Cartoon Network isn't any better. When they first started off, it was mostly nothing but Hanna-Barbera cartoons, some Looney Tunes, and some odds and ends left over from the 70s. Pretty much a psychedelic acid trip, if you were, or if you will, I should say, and it wasn't very good. However, to young me, they were great. I remember watching the Banana Splits a hell of a lot as a kid, and that's kind of sad. Although, I kind of liked the goofiness that went on in it, but it was still an interesting show. And Nickelodeon at the same time, well, their game shows were getting pretty good with the Nick Arcade, or whatever the hell that thing was called. And there was also a strange show called Wienerville. Yeah, I remember that. I wish I couldn't, but I remember that. Sort of an interesting little take as to, well, everything in general. But nonetheless, it was an interesting show. And yet, as the years went on, both networks decided to screw themselves. Now, I'll start off with Cartoon Network, mostly because I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So, yeah, I'm not showing favoritism. I'm going A, B, C comes first. Anyway, Cartoon Network started off their wonderful little campaign, as I said, with a whole bunch of old Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and some Looney Tunes as well, stuff from Tex Avery and things like that. Sort of like a cavalcade, if you will. There were some neat little programming blocks that I remember, called like one called High Noon Tunes, and a few others that names escape me at the moment. There was a lot of Yogi Bear, Hong Kong Phooey, an entire Sunday night of programming that would just make me cringe. Jabberjaw. There were shows like Top Cat, and, well, there's so many other ones. Some of them were good, don't get me wrong, but some of them were kind of bad. However, it was always the perfect balance, if you will. I remember many times watching The Adventures of Johnny Quest, and then immediately following that up with maybe a leftover adage of something else. Or my all-time personal favorite cartoon that I remember watching, The Centurions. Yes, that's right, Man and Machine, Power Extreme. I could review the crap out of that if I could watch it all again. Anyway, the series and the shows were always better and better, and they were improving over time. Originally, it started out as just simple Looney Tunes that were running indefinitely, some Huckleberry Hound, Droopy Dog, and other things, eventually expanded into its own universe of uniqueness. Toonami eventually came into the mix, and honestly, that's where the network took off like an uncontrolled rocket. They had leftover shows that were from the more action-oriented scene, including Space Ghost, the Justice League, just to name a few. Meanwhile, to replace those in the regular block, they added in some newer programs like Dexter's Lab, Johnny Bravo, the cartoons. I remember those. I had a lot of fond memories with those, including multiple contests. God, those were fun. Still remember getting screwed on that racing thing they had, though, because I ended up getting Jane Jetson, and she didn't even leave the damn starting gate. I was pissed on that. But with Cartoon Network bringing Toonami onto the block, a lot of things improved, and they improved for the good of the channel. However, with every good thing, 16,000 bad things have to eventually come out. And they managed to do that, well, many a times. This included, but was not limited to, the multiple productions, the expanding upon certain aspects, and the changing up of the guard multiple times. And by this I mean simply changing how certain shows aired, when they aired, and pretty much screwing the whole pooch. I remember watching SWAT Cats in the early mornings, and then it got bumped to the afternoons. And then it just disappeared entirely after its run was done. Now, a lot of this is simple, with licenses expiring and not being able to air the shows anymore, which is fine, I understand that. However, some of the more stupid decisions that were made still piss me off to this day. I liked Ozzy and Drix, but we didn't really need it in the afternoon as an actual show. Better yet, what was up with them trying to compete with early morning, Sunday morning educational programming? Yes, I remember the Big Bag. I wish I could forget that, but I do remember it. That being said, though, so many things were left unanswered as a call from Cartoon Network. And honestly, I felt Toonami did a wonderful job improving that, but still the network suffered a bit, at least in my opinion. While the cartoons were good, gone were the original days that held it pretty much firm to its grasp. Of course, I could just be grasping at straws here, but I kind of liked having the all-day Looney Tunes marathon leading into the nighttime programming. I remember begging my mom to let me stay up to watch Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. It's only to have her go to bed, and my personal favorite, go to bed now. Yeah, that was always a lot of fun, Mom. Anyway, the shows improved, the programming block expanded, and then Toonami just took off like a bat out of hell. Expanding to pretty much a 4 to 7 p.m. slot, all hell breaking loose, it was great. Replacing some of the dated cartoons with anime, pretty much Cartoon Network had a foothold in the door for entertainment, at least in the afternoon. How did they manage to fix that? Well, they didn't. Instead of capitalizing upon this, they decided to shoot themselves in the foot. They moved Toonami on to Saturday nights and put something else on in the afternoons called Magoozy, which later got replaced with Master Control. Yeah, I will give us this, though. Miguzi did bring the world Code Lyoko. However, Toonami brought us Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, Gundam. Yeah, I don't have to go any further from that. And that's just within like the first 3 years that it was on. I've already reviewed Toonami, not to mention multiple other people have as well, including the Nostalgia Critic, whose review of Toonami I'm still cringing at. I don't know how much inaccuracy that show could actually have, and still call itself entertainment and educational. Wow, that was bad. Anyway, is there more to this? Oh yeah, there is. Cartoon Network decided that they wanted to have a more adult-oriented late-night programming, which honestly would make sense, because some of their competitors were doing the same thing, with the exception of the almighty Mouse in the Box, aka Mickey Mouse and Disney, who had already been doing something similar, but having their shit air after midnight. Yes, I remember a couple summers staying up to listen to the intro to the black and white Zorro. Interesting, but not a good show. Hell, I actually remember getting up really early in the morning because I couldn't sleep, turning on the television, turning Disney on, and having some strange movie about a girl, a robot, something else, that were trying to stop a wizard, and they had to find something that was green in a room full of a whole bunch of junk, and I made no damn sense. Maybe if I'd seen the whole thing, but honestly, from the part that I saw to the end, it was idiotic, and I didn't need to see any more. It was pretty much Labyrinth levels of stupid, and made Jim Henson have pity on my soul. Labyrinth sucked, okay? I'm sorry, I hated that movie with a passion. David Bowie can kiss my ass. May he rest in horrible peace. But Cartoon Network screwed themselves over multiple times, eventually replacing their blocks that they had enjoyed, like Master Control, with nothing. I mean, I'm sure they put something on to replace it, but I don't remember what it was called, if it was anything at all. What I do remember, though, was some of the highlights of the post-Toonami in the afternoon era going into what became known as the Screw You era. And this was including, but not limited to, one of my all-time favorite WB properties, the Teen Titans. Yes, that's right, the original animated one, not that crappy Teen Titans Go shit that we have now. Yes, back then, Teen Titans actually kicked ass and took names. I remember multiple blocks airing sometimes during the same day. And honestly, it was a wonderful time. Cartoons that actually made sense, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends being a little strange, but at the same time, they also introduced CN City, one of the utmost greatest things Cartoon Network had ever done. And of course, they just decided to completely nuclear waste the whole thing and start fresh. And by fresh, I mean about 60 steps backwards. Most of their cartoons, I will admit, had a timestamp of right around 11 to 12, about 11 to 12 minutes, give or take. That was per part per episode. Usually two parts per episode, each part being about X amount of minutes long, encompassing the whole 30 minutes. However, Cartoon Network decided they wanted to go a different route, and this is where my mind starts to boggle a bit. They decided to get rid of the entire structure of a 30-minute show and give us nothing but crappy 15-minute programs. Now, prior to this, they had made a lot of stupid ideas, like some of those stupid holiday specials. That Thanksgiving one comes to mind. Not to mention Scary Godmother. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I was freaked out by that show. Anyway, with the advent of this newer property of shows, it kind of made you wonder what were they coming out with next, and we got our answer, in the form of Regular Show and Adventure Time, just to name a few. While those shows were good, some of the other programming that came out around the same era and around the same time sucked. Namely, The Annoying Orange, a bunch of Mad TV skits, Gone were the days of 16 and Totally Spies, replaced with 15-minute programming blocks, 90% of which ended up revolving around whatever popular show you had at the time. That worked for the longest time, and then Cartoon Network pulled their heads out of their asses for a small moment, and they gave us Steven Universe, the Rebecca Sugar Show. Yeah, and that became their saving grace, along with Regular Show and Adventure Time. But then they ended Regular Show and Adventure Time, and Steven Universe, the last that I have heard, is still going, but the last episode I saw felt like they ended the series. So I don't know who's smoking what, but whatever it is, you smoked too much of it. And that was just Cartoon Network's massive screw-up. Let's not even get into Adult Swim. What originally started out as a humble little place for more adult-oriented cartoons and some leftover Fox stuff they were getting the licenses to, immediately devolved into, what the hell am I watching? Tim and Eric Awesome Show, great job, just immediately springs to my mind. Tom Goes to the Mayor, Xavier, whatever that mole thing was. Soul of the Moment, that's right. Oh, God. I think I just cringed a bit remembering that. Gone were the good old days on Cartoon Network of The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest. A lot of other programming. The anime had all been moved to Saturday nights, and I just immediately felt so horrible that I really didn't like Cartoon Network anymore. Happily, though, by this time, there were other choices. Mostly because they started going the live-action route for a couple of their movies, including those for Ben 10 and whatever the hell that one was with a kid in the amusement park and the brain transplant. Look, that was like Chuck E. Cheese on acid, right? I'm assuming that was Chuck E. Cheese on acid, because if it's not Chuck E. Cheese on acid, then I don't understand that then at all. However, Cartoon Network may have been the king for a short amount of time. Nickelodeon is another story altogether. Where Cartoon Network had succeeded, Nickelodeon had only dreamed of. However, Nickelodeon was around before Cartoon Network. A small foothold in the door they already had that Cartoon Network immediately stomped on to pull shut. Yeah, think back to your childhood if you can, or even better yet, back to the good old days on Nickelodeon. You know, when shows like Ah Real Monsters, Hey Arnold, Doug, when those programs were on. Even Rugrats was good back then. Yeah, all of those comprised one major thing. Decent programming, wonderful plot, and a channel worth watching. Even some of their more sitcom-oriented shows that they would have on a Sunday night were good. I still remember some of their Saturday night programming like Snick, where they had the Mystery Files with Shelby Woo, Kabam, just to name a few. They were good shows, even Are You Afraid of the Dark, for as strange of a thing as it was. However, Nickelodeon is remaking that and dragging the Midnight Society down to the bowels of hell, but they'll get theirs, I hope, someday. Who knows? Anyway, I remember old Nickelodeon shows that were really good. And for the longest time, they were a staple on the Nickelodeon network, including some of their game shows like Double Dare 2000, coming out later on, and so on and so forth. Shows like Legends of the Hidden Temple and their Wienerville show definitely had some interesting ideas and were entertaining, but had some major issues. Though I remember watching Wienerville multiple times when I was growing up in second grade, so that's something. However, as with all good things, eventually they come to an end. And that was when the annoying yellow sponge from hell arrived. Yes, everyone's favorite annoying yellow sponge from hell, SpongeBob. Or, well, this thing. Him. Yes, that's right. SpongeBob SquarePants had arrived. Removing such shows like Ren and Stimpy was a simple aspect, and in all honesty, not really a love loss. Hey Arnold, Rugrats, and Doug, however, hurt like hell. And they left and were killed off so SpongeBob could stay. Sure, We'll go with that. And that became Nickelodeon's staple program for the longest time. Now, they had their own children's entertainment section that came about later on, and had such wonderful shows like Blue's Clues, and, well, I remember Blue's Clues a lot. Oh, there was Rupert. I remember Rupert. Bob the Builder was on Nickelodeon, too, for a short time. The good Bob the Builder. Anyway, Nickelodeon eventually screwed themselves over again. Right around the early to mid 2000, and I mean like within the mid, between 2000 and 2000 and I'm going to say like maybe 4, they decided to come out with a whole bunch of new programming. And this stuff had some mixed reactions. Some of this programming included the newer show like Cousin Skeeter, which, if you think about it, Disney XD did their own version of this called Crash and Bernstein, which was 1,000 times better than Cousin Skeeter was on Nickelodeon. Somebody explain that to me. Seriously, I'll wait. Okay, you had your chance. Anyway, shows like this did not exactly help Nickelodeon's credibility. Cat Dog was a show that was good, but it was once again removed and subjugated to the trash can of the great beyond. So were a lot of the previous shows that had come out and were around, replaced with more tween and teen-centric shows. Now, I will admit I did enjoy Pelswick. That was a very interesting show. And yes, I will sadly admit this too, I did like As Told by Ginger. Mostly as a guilty pleasure, but still, I liked As Told by Ginger. It was a good show. Albeit a bit strange, but a good show nonetheless. But those were just a few of the decent shows. Then there were some that were not so decent. Anybody remember Rocket Power? Yeah, I know it wasn't everybody's favorite show, and in all honesty, it was alright, but not exactly something set for Nickelodeon. However, with the changing demographics, Nickelodeon figured it was time we should pretty much dive headfirst into the screw you territory. And they did that, and it... meh. Yeah. More and more shows were replaced. All that, it changed casts multiple times. Yes, they had their own version of Saturday Night Live for kids. And so many other of the live-action programming, like Kenan and Kel, had just gone. Replaced with, well, more tween-centric shows. iCarly jumps to mind first. However, we also had another show that I enjoyed called Zoe 101. Sort of like a soap opera, but for teenagers. And honestly, I appreciated that. Soap opera for teenagers was really good. Now, third season should have been better, but then again, beggars can't be choosers at that point. I did, in fact, though, enjoy multiple viewings of said shows, and honestly, Victorious wasn't bad. However, Sam and Cat was. Yes, if memory serves, this would be what was called the Dan Schneider era. Cringes just saying it. All the while, the little annoying yellow sponge from hell is still rummaging around Nickelodeon for scraps. Still doing programming, still having specials, a movie, and so many other things wrong with him. Look, I admit, the Christmas episode is fine, and I get a joke out of the Weast thing, that's it. Otherwise, SpongeBob is more annoying than a paper cut. Very, very annoying. But Nickelodeon wasn't done screwing with themselves just yet. Realizing that cartoons were starting to go the way of the dinosaur, except for SpongeBob, because they were milking that yellow bastard for everything they could. I'm serious, merchandise galore. Milking the little bastard for whatever they could get. Bastards. We eventually were given what I'd like to call the screw you of Nickelodeon. And that was the full-centric live-action series. Now, this basically was something similar to what they did in the 90s, but on a much more grandiose scale. Shows like Henry Danger came into existence. Big Time Rush, which was good, but still had to come out at the wrong time. And so many others. Drake and Josh. Anyone remember that show? That came out before iCarly, and it sucked. I hated it with a passion. I cringed when it came on. And yet, this is what we had for the longest time. Now, of course, there could have been ways to prevent this, fix this, alternate this into a whole new dimension. But of course, we can't do that. Now, why can't we do that? Well, apparently it wasn't possible. Fans liked everything, viewership was up, so what the hell? Let's just keep going this route. More and more of the Nicktoons were sent over to the Nicktoons network, which, unless you had the premium section in cable, you weren't getting. When they finally got their hands on something decent, I cringed even more. When Nickelodeon got their hands on Power Rangers, it hurt a lot. Granted, they didn't do a bad job of it, putting it on in the afternoon, and they did manage to get their hands on one anime series, although they managed to get that canceled after 3 episodes. Because they poorly planned it out. Episode 1 premiered alongside the one Power Rangers, I think it was Super Samurai or one of the Samurai episodes, and then Digimon Fusion began right after it. The second episode aired the week later, and episode 3 got delayed due to the Worldwide Day of Play. Yeah, that's another thing that Nickelodeon did. To get kids to go outside and actually exercise and get off their ass and not watch Nickelodeon, because, you know, the ratings are everything that they need to keep the channel afloat here, they decided to introduce the Worldwide Day of Play, where they would shut down their entire operation for a few hours to force kids to go outside and play. Not really caring if they lived in a safe neighborhood, or if it was pouring down rain, 106 degrees outside, or if, you know, they might have been unable to actually physically go outside due to an illness, injury, or things like that. It's like, well, you wanted to watch Nickelodeon today? Screw you. And still, Nickelodeon screwed the pooch. Keeping some of their older stuff from back in the 90s, like the Kids' Choice Awards, still helped Nickelodeon, but in the long run wasn't enough to keep it going. And alas, the series and shows eventually, finally, started seeing the lights of day. However, Nickelodeon has started getting rid of more of the older, or some of these stupid live-action shows, but replacing them with the same program, just in cartoon form. Again, I give you Henry Danger, for example. Hell, look at Breadwinners. That was that show that came out, like, in, I want to say after around 2009? Hell, I would take an episode of Fanboy and Chum Chum. Yes, I know. There are people that hate that show. Here's a newsflash for you. I like Jimmy Neutron. That show's fine. Speaking of Jimmy Neutron, there was another cash cow that they could have endured a little harder. But, all in all, Nickelodeon had its time in the sun, but eventually managed to screw up the concept. Having your more adult-oriented stuff for teenagers on at night is not the same thing as shoving it on the whole day. But then eventually, they realized their mistake, and then got rid of 90% of their programming SpongeBob. Now, granted, nowadays they also have the Loud House. If it's not 90% SpongeBob airing during the day, you get the Loud House. You know, after they have their whole Nick Jr. educational thing so they can keep their okay with everybody else, then you get SpongeBob or the Loud House. What I would give for the old days with Doug, the Rugrats. Hey Arnold. But, again, those are days that are long past. But, maybe they'll come back. Who knows? I sure as hell don't. So which one did it better, Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon? Well, they both had their time in the sun. They both tried their damnedest, and they both failed miserably. Like I said, it was a no-win scenario. Basically, Nickelodeon did start off strong, and Cartoon Network came in hitting it right off the bat, but eventually, both of them managed to screw up what made them so great. With Cartoon Network, they got rid of a majority of their programming to make Teen Titans Go and their other 15-minute programs stick out, whereas Nickelodeon just ditched the majority of their programming for teen stuff and SpongeBob. How's Disney doing, I wonder? Disney Channel's doing pretty good, I guess. You know what, they had the Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Sweet Life on Deck, Hannah Montana. Austin and Ally. They actually split off to a sister station called Toon Disney, which became Disney XD. Yeah, I think Disney was doing pretty good. So what the hell was Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network's issue that they were screwing the pooch so many times? I guess, like, how many licks till it gets to the center of a Tootsie Pop, the world will just never know. Hopefully, though, Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network will realize their mistakes, pull their heads firmly out of their ass, and fix the problems that they've already caused so many. I'm Andrew Rhodes. Thank you for joining me this time on Andrew Discusses. Until next time, take care, everyone.